Go. Hi guys, my name is Abby Hahn. I am a first year master's student of recreation and youth development. And this is group discussion number 4.
Hi guys, I'm Hayden Schott. I'm doing the Ag Leadership Certificate.
Hey, I'm Alyssa. I'm also in the Recreation of Youth Development program.
Hey,
I'm Eric. Oh, go ahead. You got it.
I'm JD Durante Davis. I'm also doing recreation leadership. Nice to meet you all.
I'm Eric Casarez. I'm doing the ag leadership major as well. So
Perfect. Awesome, you guys. So this week we got to go over leadership and management for youth development programs. We went through 3 different readings and now get to discuss our different leadership styles.
I guess
Go for it, Eric.
I was just gonna ask, I mean, you can go, but I was just gonna say, what is everybody's experience in youth development? Obviously we all have a different type of leadership style, but does anybody have past experiences that they could elaborate on that they wanted to start?
Yeah, see, me at first, I was a part of a recreation center called Pillar Recreation Center, and I was one of the guys on the staff that was being a coach. And I was actually doing this a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, when I was in high school, and I felt get grooming the youth and grooming the kids because I was a coach of the football team. So I felt like I was a coach, and I felt good about it, teaching them the things that I wanted to learn when I was their age. So by being a staff member and a coach, it taught me a lot.
I can go off that. Yeah, I guess similarly, I would talk about the difference in I think sometimes I know we've talked about in this class about changing leadership styles according to different situations and stuff and how difficult that can be. And I was thinking about I used to be a part of a staff of it's like a surf instruction group for underprivileged kids, and I used to lead that. And then at the same time, I was in junior college baseball, and so I was a leader on that team as well. And I thought about the difference in those two environments and how I kind of had to alter my different leadership styles between those because obviously the way that I would attempt to lead or connect with 20-year-old men is a little different than 11-year-old kids. I think that was probably my first real experience where I had to learn about the difficulty of changing leadership styles and checking in and out of certain, whether it's relation type, whatever it may be.
I agree. I think for me as well, I worked summer camp for the last 3 years, and I've just gotten to work with a lot of elementary school youth in Tyler. And then I've also gotten to serve in different ministry programs through my church here in College Station, also elementary school age kids. And a lot of them are kinder to 2nd grade, and then was also a part of another organization here in town called Impact Retreat, and was able to lead lower classmen college students. And so I would definitely say age-wise leadership styles changed dependent on the scenario.
Yeah, so I guess my experience in youth development and youth organizations is, I mean, it's kind of still developing. I'm doing a another class, and it's we're learning how to facilitate to a different group of people. And so I the only I've never done an actual facilitation of doing stuff like that, but I have I'm on the cross country and track team. And I've been here for 5 years now, so I kind of feel like I'm the leader now of the team. And so I'm doing something with them where I'm going to facilitate different activities, and then I'm going to present it in my class here in a couple weeks. And so I think I kind of agree with what JD was saying about his leadership style and coaching is I kind of feel like I'm going down that path is I'm developing things for people to use in the future. Just something for empathy, self-awareness, stuff they talked about in the chapter. And I'm still while I don't really have the experience in youth development, I'm kind of going along those lines, and that's why I'm like I ended up like majoring in leadership because I wanted to do stuff along those ways. So that's kind of like my experience and everything.
Yeah. My background comes from like really two drastically different areas. So mainly I've worked with college age students in obviously like my undergrad. So leading them on trips and generally like high risk situations through challenge courses and backcountry trips. And then also working with kids 3rd through 8th grade in an environmental education system. So teaching them environmental education and different types of things like that, but also trips and challenge courses. So yeah, like my experience working with youth and having to change the way that I lead them and communicate with them is it's two different roadblocks. Like there's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences in like how to know like when you need to change what you're doing in those situations.
I mean, I know I personally, I was reading the first article for this, the discussion, and it talked about the impact of graduate degrees in leadership, like professionalism and the mannerisms of youth leadership in general. And I could definitely say, like myself, I've only been a part of the program for this semester. It's my first semester here, and I definitely have learned more than I thought I knew. And I think like while I may have had a ton of leadership experiences growing up, whether it be on the baseball field or just with people in general, with the youth, I think going through a program where you truly do learn the ins and outs definitely makes you feel a little less knowledgeable about it, which is good because that means you have room to grow. So I thought that that first article kind of hit home with me about that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. One thing that like kind of like resonated with me that stood out in the article, but like it's something that like was like um really focused on in undergrad, was that leadership is not inherent. It's not you're not born with it. There's always like sometimes people are like, oh, they're born to be a leader, but that's not true. Like you're not born with that inherent ability. It's something that's learned through the people around you, through the experiences that you have, through classes, and those just like learning from other people and what you do yourself versus what other people teach you. And so I think like you were talking about Hayden, like going through the article and it's saying like, oh, like the advancement in leadership through the classes that we're taking is definitely something that we could be able to like see as we go through these classes and through our year of being here. And just also like being able to see it from a different perspective, like the leadership that opportunities that I've had before. Those were kind of like, okay, I'm thrown into it. I'm going to learn it and like learn how to become a leader and like learning from other people around me, but kind of like learning from a class where it's like not focusing on what you're doing, but kind of like the background behind it and like seeing like the overhead, like, okay, this is how leadership affects kids. This is how leadership affects the coworkers that you work with and like the programs and stuff like that. Kind of seeing it from a different perspective, but also how they correlate.
I agree. It's been very interesting, like starting the different programs that I've worked in with kids. That all started as soon as I came to A&M. And so I was learning about youth development during undergrad while also getting to pursue it in the workplace. And so getting to relate theory to practice and context, it all made everything I guess make sense. And everything that I was learning in the classroom became applicable, and those things that I was taught in my classes helped me become the leader that I was able to through those programs. And I would definitely say that those classes for sure impacted that ability.
Yeah, like you said, those classes, I took some classes like that also, and it was like, you like when you're trying to teach kids certain things and like you've experienced it as well, or maybe you haven't experienced it, but you learned it from like a class or learned it from like something that you experienced. It feels kind of good actually, because it's like, dang, I actually learned this. So now since I learned this, I can put this into somebody else's head or somebody else's brain so they can take the same knowledge I took from a class. So I get exactly what you're saying as far as leadership.
Do you guys think your leadership style in general, or more specifically, has changed over the years? Because I'm thinking about like myself, and I definitely feel like I don't know if growing is the right word, but it's definitely just changed as far as my awareness of how I lead, and I think the ways that I lead. And I'm not saying it changes for better, even for better or worse. I just think that you're going to go through changes, and I've definitely noticed that I've led in many different ways throughout my life, different experiences.
So what you think impact people more, leading people through like example of like actually showing them, or being more of like a vocal type of person?
I mean, I would say I think it's a big. I think it's like actually part of the Aggie honor code at the end. It says like and hold others accountable. I think leading through example is good, but not enough. I think you have to hold set the example and then hold others to that standard. And to do that, a lot of the times, I think you have to be vocal. Um, but it doesn't. I think everyone's experienced like the really loud leader, and I think a lot of times those guys uh, subconsciously get disrespected by the group just because they're so loud and obnoxious. I think there's a way to do it to calmly help others hold themselves to a standard that you set by leading by example.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I think leading by example is important, but I think being vocal is more important because, when I think about leadership, leadership is about, you and other people, and it's about engaging in communication. And sometimes it can be hard to have, good communication if you're not vocal, in a sense. So I feel like the more vocal you are, the better it can help you. I'm not saying that like people that aren't vocal can't be good leaders, but I just think it makes it a lot easier when you have like an engaging communication aspect of things. And yeah, so I would say like they both like coexist, but I would probably go with being more vocal personally.
Going off of that, I think so. I always say that my leadership style is very situational. It changes depending on the people that you lead, the experiences that you're doing, and the programs that you're part of. And so, kind of like speaking on what you asked, JD, I think it really just depends on like one, you as a leader, like what you're comfortable with and what your skill strengths and weaknesses are, but also depending on like, who you're leading. Like some people need a very vocal leader, and some people really need to be shown things. Some people need to walk through it and like physically do it themselves. Some people need a visual representation. Just depending like what the activity or the program or anything like that is. I think it's very situationally based. So depending on like what scenario you're in. So I'm very much used to like high risk, high intensity situations, like where we're leading trips. And it kind of just depends. So like if I'm leading college students, that what that leadership style looks like versus if I'm leading kids on the water is going to drastically look very different because what they need and like the attention span that they need is very different. And so like that's why I always say is very situationally. So sometimes like you have to step in and be more authoritative and telling them that this is exactly how it's going to go. And sometimes you could be a little bit more democratic or change it and like let them lead and let them have that experience while you're kind of guiding them, but you're not like fully taking over the experience from them. So very situationally based.
I think I agree with that perspective as well. People come from all kinds of different backgrounds, and just taking into account that. And I think also like my leadership style has changed um growing up, just like becoming more empathetic and also situationally aware, like Alyssa was saying earlier, just being aware like the way people learn are very different. Um Therefore the way that you teach should change with that.
I also think like some people can get away with leading by example per se. I guess in a organization, for to use that as an example, like if someone is given a high role, so like let's say they're president or something along the lines where people kind of have to respect them and listen to them, they can get away with leading by example and maybe not being a real relationship built leader because they have a high role. So people are going to have to listen to them. Same thing with like sports. If you have a kid who's really good at playing that sport, then he's going to think he's leading by example, but people are just kind of following him because he's so good. And so people can get away with with leading by example and not really having to go. I think it's a lot harder to be not given a high role and being a vocal leader because that's kind of all you can do. You haven't had the performance or title to back you up, so you kind of have to be a vocal leader who connects with the people around them and helps them.
Yeah, Hayden, I definitely agree with that. Being on a sports team, like, I've been around like a lot of vocal leaders, a lot of people that just lead by example, and I feel like the younger people that come in, a team changes every time, and I think that's what's so good. And leading by example is super important because when new teammates come in, you don't always get a chance to meet those type of new teammates that come in. So they're not really like comfortable with like how you are and what your values are and what you say. So they're just going to look at who you are as an athlete, and they're going to be like, okay, well, that guy's maybe the best basketball player, he's the best football player. In my case, oh, he's the best runner. Like I need to do what he's doing and to be as successful as him. And they might not even know like what type of like person he actually is. That's their first initial reaction because they lead by example of what they do in their own respective sport. So.
Yeah, and I feel certain people look at it like, okay, if I see that he's talented, then he's automatically a leader, which is not true all the time. So I get exactly what you're saying. And I done been through it with sports too. Like I play football, so it's like certain people that might be one of the best, the top on the team, and their personality don't match they play. So they might be one of the best on the team, but they're not a leader in certain ways. But they do good in the field when it's time to perform, but it's hard for them to lead because that's not them. That's not who they are. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
Also,
goes back to like, sorry.
there you go. Go, listen. Go.
I was just gonna say like what y'all are bringing up like reminds me of like actual power versus perceived power and how that relates to like leadership. So like they might have actual power, but if their leadership style doesn't like correlate to what the group needs, or they step back and like they have the actual power, but the person that has perceived power, like you're saying, like maybe a leader because they're the fastest player, then that's the person that's looked to, but they don't actually have any power, and their leadership style sometimes may not actually that like correlate with what they're doing. So they could like actually have really good leadership, and like because they're looked to, they don't actually have any power, but then they step into that role versus if they don't have very well good leadership, or that's just not like the way that they take a situation, they don't actually have any power, but everybody perceives that they do. So yeah.
Yeah. So who do y'all think is easier to follow? The one that's more vocal or the one that's just putting in the most work, or like the most talented, as I should say? That's kind of hard.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know.
I think it depends on the situation. Sometimes, like I've seen leaders that are very vocal, but they're a lot of talk, but they don't actually back up what they're saying. So somebody's saying like, "Oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. This is the way you do it," but then you don't see them doing it. Doesn't matter if they like necessarily have to be doing it or not. Like if they're not going to back it up, what they're telling you to do, then the person that's actually putting in the work and not very vocal, I'm going to more likely follow them because like they're may not like speaking their leadership, but they're showing it by what they're doing. So like what you're saying, like leading by example. So I think it just really depends on the situation. Somebody could still be very vocal, but like they're actually adamant and like helping as well. So I think it just depends on the situation.
You made a good point because earlier Eric was like, he gonna follow the person that's more of a vocal person. So we having good conversation. I like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go for it, Eric.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, I personally like. I think I relate to more people that are vocal because I feel like I'm more of a vocal person myself.
Mhm.
So I'm around people that are gonna be more vocal.
Yeah.
And so like that's why. But I think Alyssa brings up a good point. Saying that like you're not like somebody can be vocal, but if they're not doing the things that they're speaking, then what's the point? So I mean, I think they kind of like coexist with each other, like I said. um but I mean, I think a good leader is not just about somebody who is vocal or who leads by example, but just like does the other things, like include, make sure like nothing is all about them. Like they do it for the group, the setting that they're doing it for. They can admit when they're wrong, and they
Like
know that they're not perfect. Like so there's like they're leading by example and they're being vocal about it, but they also know that they're not perfect and they can admit to their mistakes and see how they can get better too. And so that's what I try to do when I'm talking to my teammates that are younger and that look up to me. Is like I would say like I try to put myself in their shoes, like, hey, like, like I'm saying this stuff out of love because I was in your shoes at one point, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I don't want y'all to make these same mistakes too. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
just kind of my opinion.
No, that I think like the what Alyssa said and what you guys have piggybacked on is probably like the most important aspect that I mean it kind of even changes my answer from what I said earlier because I think like I think of some of the greatest leaders that I've always watched videos of in my life. Like I'm a big Tom Brady fan, and I know that his saying was always "do as I do, not as I say." And so like he can, and he's a vocal guy for sure. But what he says he's going to do or tells you to do, he's going to do the exact same thing and probably do it more and probably better. Because his whole thing was, I'm not going to tell you to do something and then have you look at me, who's supposed to be a leader, and me not doing it. So I think you hit it on the head, Alyssa. I think that I guess you can be vocal, but I think there's a lot of hypocrisy that comes along with vocal leaders. And you kind of got to avoid that to be a true one.
I also think like if you think about leading by example, it's also super important because I feel like leading by example is more important for like long term success. Because if somebody like involved in sports, wants to be as good as somebody that is leading by example, they can't do it overnight, right? So like if somebody wants to be the best basketball player, they want to be as good as the person who's the best shooter on the team. They can't just go and practice for a week straight and just shoot as many basketballs as possible and then say, oh, I'm as good as him. Like it's going to take time. They're going to go through process and everything. So like it doesn't happen overnight, and I think that's what's so important about leading by examples is like knowing that like yeah, you can do things that other people do to like make yourself great, but it's not going to happen right away.
Mhm. I agree.
Pretty good, guys. Pretty damn good.
But have
Yeah,
anything to add? Or we
Um, I think I want to ask, so I think it was the second reading that we did. It has a list of like the top qualities for hiring, and I was wondering if y'all agreed with this list. So it says the top has to be integrity, motivation, capacity, understanding, knowledge, and then experience. Do y'all agree with like how that's ordered?
I think I can see why they put all of those characteristics over experience. Because like when you think about it, like what makes up a leader, like is it like the ability to speak out, or is it the ability to do all those things that like makes them efficient and effective, like as a leading person? So somebody that's gonna, like we've been saying, lead by example. So it's not necessarily always the experience that makes them do that, but like their ability to communicate, their ability to be organized, their ability to, follow directions when they need to. So like all of those things that you just like listed off. I would agree in some aspects, depending on the position and like the job, like you can have experience, but does that experience mean that you are a good leader? Does that mean that you have those abilities to piggyback off of? Because leadership isn't just one thing, it's a grouping of multiple things. So having that ability over sometimes experience, or just not having as much as somebody else, but you have all those other qualities.
Yeah. I feel like the integrity portion just backs what y'all have been saying, like this entire discussion of if you're gonna lead, you better do what you're preaching, like practice what you preach. And so I think that component being at the top, it like totally makes sense.
Yeah, and also I feel like integrity is like, doing the right thing when nobody else is looking. So like if you want to be a leader, you gotta also do it when nobody's looking at you. Like me, I watch film on daily, like by myself. I try to focus on the right things just so I can make sure I'm in the right spot when it's time to perform. So like I agree with you saying as far as the integrity aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like try to get like too motivational in here, but I did watch like a video not too long ago. Well, we watched it in our team meeting. Our coach put it on, and I thought it was like it kind of really stuck out to me because JD, you were mentioning like doing stuff like doing the extra stuff outside when nobody's looking, and I just think that's so important because people think like when you have to do extra, you have to like maybe like if you run, like you have to run way more, but it's not always like that. It's always about sometimes the little things that you do, like getting sleep, eating right, just like the simple stuff like that, the small stuff. So the quote was like, the guy was saying, like, uh if you're able to do little things like they're big things, then one day you can do big things like they're little things. And that just kind of stuck out to me because
Hold on. You gotta say it again. You dropping jewels, bro.
yeah. So I think he was like, if you, I don't know exactly what it was, but I think it was like, if you're able to do big things like they're small things, then one day you'll be able to do, or if you're able to do small things like they're big things, then one day you'll be able to do big things like they're small things.
Yeah. Right
So
Taking
now.
that down.
Yeah, this in my notes.
That's gold, Eric. Gold mining. This is great.
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to get too motivational in here.
Hey, I mean, it applies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you guys had?
I'm good.
Awesome.
Y'all did great.